Thank you very much for waiting, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're ready to start the closing session. I have the honor of introducing the speakers of this closing session. Heizo Takenaka, professor at Keio University, is the chairman of the Institute for Urban Strategies of the Mori Memorial Foundation, and he's the director of the Academyhills. He has served as the associate professor of Harvard University and professor of Faculty of Policy Management at Keio University. He served as Minister of Economic and Fiscal Policy, Financial Services, Economic Fiscal Policy, and Economic Fiscal Policy and Privatization of the Postal Services, as well as Internal Affairs and Communications and Privatization of the Postal Services. Hiroo Ichikawa, Dean of the Professional Graduate School of Governance Studies of Meiji University and Executive Director of the Mori Memorial Foundation. He majors in urban policy, urban and regional planning, and risk management. He has been appointed as chairman and committee members of Japanese national and local governments such as Urban Planning Council. He has authored many books in this field. Fumio Nanjo, director of Mori Art Museum. And finally, but not the least, Joichi Ito, director of MIT Media Lab. I'd now like to ask the four individuals to come up on the stage. Professors Takenaka, Ichikawa, Mr. Nanjo, and Director Ito, please. Thank you. In this closing session, we will go over the conversation that was heard over the last 3 days. We'll go over the presentations and the comments made at each session. This is the closing session of the Innovative City Forum commemorating the 10th anniversary of Roppongi Hills. I'd like to give the floor to Professor Takenaka, please. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the very end of the 3-day Innovative City Forum. I hope you have enjoyed various sessions we've had, and I'm wondering what reactions you have. And we're seated here in front with the attempt to summarize. Let me first begin with how this started, the aim of this forum. The future of cities is a global agenda, is the basic assumption. And we wanted to involve multi-stakeholders to have a constructive discussion on this theme. Lifestyle, the future of lifestyle, the new type of lifestyles are being proposed at urban environment. Innovation, according to Schumpeter, would be the result of new combinations, new integrations. And we wanted to discuss this very vibrant city as a place for such activities. There is a global competition, which in a way is the competition amongst different cities. There are challenges faced by different cities. There are some lessons that we can learn from each other. And so that was the starting point of this forum, the agenda. At the very beginning of the forum, we experimented something rather interesting. We wanted to have some consensus amongst your thoughts on cities. We did a small surveys, and the results were as follows. with the Olympics in 2020, what do you think will be the ranking of Tokyo? As you know, since 6 years ago, the Mori Memorial Foundation has been organizing this ranking, comprehensive ranking of cities. Tokyo has been number 4 since the first year. And the question asked was, would Tokyo be ranked higher, lower in year 2020? And about 3/4 of the respondents expected Tokyo to be ranked higher, some ranked lower, about a quarter, assuming the same. And right after that session, we announced the ranking for this year, and we conducted some simulation in conjunction with the announcement vis-a-vis 2020, and I'd like to invite Professor Ichikawa to talk about the results of the simulation as well. Now, the second question we asked was this. This was a really almost impossible question, and I think we discussed this in the previous session as well, and that is, which one is more important for the future cities? Would it be art or technology? We know that they're both important, but if you were forced to choose between the two, which do you think is more important? And this was the result, 50-50. We assumed that maybe technology supporters would be twice as many as art, but as far as the participants at that opening session was concerned, it was 50-50. And we would go over what discussions took place over the past 3 days regarding this art versus technology. The third question was, which one is more important for the future cities, the leadership or free activities, which I think it was one of the subjects discussed in the previous session as well. Should we have total planning based on leadership or free activities? Of course, we need both. But if we were forced to choose between the two, which do you think is more important? And a little over 50% chose leadership. Doesn't mean that this should be pursued at the cost of free activities. And we'd like to see what kind of conversation took place over the last 3 days in light of this. And question number 4. For Tokyo to become number 1 in the world, what's most important? Economic power, cultural power, technological power, or infrastructure maintenance? In that comprehensive ranking, we have about 70 indicators comprising economic power, cultural power, etc. And this was a very impressive result that we got in this survey. Overwhelming majority chose cultural power. I think there are several ways to interpret this. Could mean that although Tokyo has a potential of cultural power, there's still room for improvement, or it could mean that we already have power. Anyway, 2 days ago, overwhelming majority felt that cultural power should be the basis of improvement of Tokyo. And this really encouraged Mr. Nanjo, I'm told. And the fifth question, what do you think the cities all over the world will be for us in 20 years? Better off or worse off? 2/3 said better off, optimistic, but 1/3 indicated some concerns. I mean, that's one way to interpret this result. So that was the start of our forum. Let's see what happened over the last 3 days. So that was the consensus. That was the assumption. Art, technology, culture. You moderated several sessions looking at different aspects. What discussions took place? What was your observation of the trend? As chairpersons of several sessions, I would like you to summarize the discussions. Professor Ito, you chaired 2 sessions on urban planning.
As Professor Takenaka said about ranking of Tokyo as a city, of course, you know, this is not a purpose to raise the ranking of this city. But we want to understand what are the challenges we are faced with. By solving these problems and challenges, maybe we'll be able to build a better city So that's the point of the sessions that I moderated. In the first day, we had a creative strategy of the urban area. The urban center is really the heart of activity of the city. Tokyo, Singapore, and Seoul are 3 cities that are covered in the session. With regard to the Tokyo example, based upon Tokyo, we have had Mr. Tsuji, Shingo Tsuji, president of Mori building. And from Singapore, we had the advisory committee chairman, Taika, and Chichen Chu, the honorary professor of Seoul University, who was the head of advisory organization to president in Korea. Why we chose these speakers? As a matter of fact, in the 20th century, the major theme of cities is really this urban center. But in the 21st century, we already built the mega centers, and we are asking question now, what will happen of these urban center? What it has been revealed is that the cities may be a mega city. We need to elucidate what is happening in the center of a major city. We have GPCI, which is the city ranking, 5 to 10 radius from the center of the city really has a determining factor. And in 3 cities, there are respective efforts made. Top 10 cities of the world. Well, I'm not stick to ranking, but their places may be traded easily. But we were able to discuss specific examples of efforts that are made by different cities. The latest information, what plans the city has, especially Professor Yu Taiga from Singapore talked about the family of people. It is almost like a family constitution. This is how he examines the development of a city. It is not just the result of ranking. Yes, there are diversity of cities. And on the same day, as Professor Takenaka said, this year's GPCI 2013 was announced, and as a result, Tokyo was ranked the same number 4. Tokyo's power has been declining, if it's not flat, but New York and London and Singapore, Seoul, that are actually picking up their scores. If this trend continues on, maybe they will surpass Tokyo. So at this timing, we were able to win the right to host Olympic Games in 2020. As you can easily imagine, if you carry out certain activities, especially where we are weak, cultural affairs, we'll be able to raise our ranking standings. The future challenge for us is to be able to exert our power as a high-ranking city. Now, when you think of a city, you need to examine the value system as well. When you evaluate a city, you may count the number of cities, how convenient the city is designed. Many of these are numerical indicators, but as you live in a city, maybe we appreciate city from a different perspective. When you travel outside Japan and come back to Japan, you would feel very comfortable, feel very at home, because as hospitality or the value system that are most fitting, something that is not visible. Because of this, the sense of security, safety, efficiency, and hospitality, and metabolism, 6 different indicators are newly introduced to understand the value of a city. We had 4 experts talking to us in the session. Dr. Saskia Sassen, who talked about the urban knowledge capital. There is a hidden, invisible capital that resides in the city. And from Better Foundation, we had Karen Tang. Hong Kong is a compact city. It has the highest efficiency in the world. What's on their mind of the people in that city? It's not just the size that is compact and efficiency. We know there is more than that. We also had two from business industries. From Rixo President, Mr. Fujimori. Rixo has produced interior related mechanisms that makes life very convenient and comfortable. And also from Japan GE, we had Mr. Nobon, who placed emphasis on the medical area. And there was something common between these two speakers. Sensitivity, the value of sensitivity, intangible urban values. In order to make citizens more comfortable, they take this intangible urban values for granted. And behind all this, there are problems of energy and environment. How can we reduce energy consumption? In order to explore the new values of cities, we need to consider how we can possibly save energy consumption to protect this planet. Without that effort, we would not be able to improve the values of cities. And when we think of future strategies, we've been able to actually receive a lot of great advice. Yes, I think you talked a lot. We had multiple sessions. You cannot attend all of the sessions at the same time, so please make use of the summary he shared with us. And the city ranking was reported in yesterday's morning paper. And it has been a simulation that if we have been able to overcome some of the challenges, we'll be able to raise our ranking up to number 3. Now, Mr. Nanjo, would you like to also try to summarize the discussion which took place in our session? Yes, I'd like to spend 5 or 6 minutes. I actually moderated multiple sessions. It will be very hard to summarize each session. But on the 17th, creative session number 1, how culture can encourage changes of a society or a city. Culture, art, design, in other words, I don't know what to call this, maybe creative industry. A diverse range of activities in this kind of industry can actually change the process of the course of city's development. Maybe not the development, but the environment can be changed. And as a tool, it is a recognized tool. In many Asian countries, this concept has spread, and in many of these countries, culture has been utilized as a tool to improve city environment and urban environment. In culture session number 2, we had people who are creative, how design can possibly change the whole society. And Mr. Nao, Kohei Nao, maybe not directly, but how art is involved in the transformation of society. He has given us a statement. And Kenya Hara is from House, talked about House Vision. This will be the platform for the future's lifestyles of people. He has actually carried out the exhibitions. He has cited his own experiences from that. And session 3, art emerges everywhere. In this session, how art context can be interpreted. That was the original question asked by Mr. Yamaide, who had an exhibition in the town of Beppu. Thus, Beppu as a town has been transformed substantially. There are a lot of non-Japanese people residing in this small town. It's very significant effort to organize the exhibition there. MC Tan Chien in Ilan, 40 minutes from Taipei. Fan Sheyuan, he actually connected building new roads so that the town will be renovated and there will be non-permanent bridge made. But it's a very nice, very useful, convenient bridge for the local people. And that's where he started. And lastly, Metabolism architecture exhibition that Mori Art Museum organized. It is the same size of public gallery, which is actually put up in the town. And it will be festival square where people get together. This space is also designed by him.
So there were some specific details that were covered in his presentation. And with love, he talked because he has been residing there for an extended amount of time. So it was quite an interesting session. And this morning, one of the session was titled "History of Art Foretells the Future." Museum becomes the basis of a lot of the information, material with regard to art. And so we talked about the future based on the history of art. We would try to understand it now based upon the past, and also with regards to the future we might be able to foretell. And we talked about what kind of role art plays in the society was discussed there. And next there was the Mori Art Museum Session 2, today's session titled "What's Happening in Asia Now?" 3 large-scale museums will be opening in the near future in Asia, and we had the directors from the 3 over, and they talked about the concept of their museums and what it is going to be like in the future. Japan houses 500 museums. In terms of scale, there is going to be an era of museum in Asia in the near future. They're going to be different from that of those of Japan, and they're going to be larger. And we're entering an era in which these museums will keep coming up. So what would the museum play? What kind of role would the museum play? And what should Japan do? So the session posed us with a question like this. And the next is a Mori Art Museum Session 3, Creative Cities and Life in the Future, which just ended. That is a tough discussion to summarize. We talked about New York's MoMA, London Tate, the directors from both talked about their museum's evolutions and expansion and the relationship between people and the museum in the city. And Mr. Ito talked about the pre-internet and post-internet. And he talked about the change made to the workings of the brain. Those are the days that we are living in at the moment. So we are living in the age of change. So in that, Mr. Ichikawa mentioned that this is going to be changing the museum in the cities, and a lot of the good museums exist in the city. So how would we be that change, and what kind of a vision will exist for the future of this? So we have received a hint and a trigger to think about what it is going to be like in the future. I was not able to mention the entire list of the panelists, but through these discussions, I've got an impression that we have to continue to go through these discussions. And thank you very much for summarizing in 6 minutes. I was afraid that it may not happen, but it did. And Mr. Ito, you had a very unique technology-related session. You produced them, and you also chaired them. And there might be some audience members that were not participating in your events. Well, if you will be able to summarize your sessions in 5 minutes, that would be appreciated. And Nanjo-san always says that the technology is part of art. and you only gave me one session. So, with that grudge, I tried to collect someone that is not going to be fitting within the realm of technology. There are a lot of tracks in the program, but I hope that there can be more of an interdisciplinary communication. So that is my overview. And also, Neri Oxman, who was a keynote speaker, she is my professor as well. And she covers art, science, design, and engineering. All of them is done by her. And the word permission was used earlier. Let's think about Japan. People would say that I'm going to go into a scientific department or the cultural department or language departments, and with that, they will not be able to state their opinions for the other department. And artists should study science and vice versa as well. That should happen. And this is something that I have repeatedly mentioned. And the reason why I've decided to put her as a keynote is because I wanted to showcase that there is someone that will be able to cover both of these areas. And going on to Liz Desert, she is Princeton's architect. She is an architect that is trying to break the walls. But whatever you do, and whatever she does, it is something beyond the imagination of the architect. So she's a disruptive architect. And that session was technology related, but she talked about the city. She talked about the New York High Line, the destructed High Line. How would High Line be renovated? She's a designer, but there was a grassroots activities as well, and how that was done was mentioned. And another one, Mr. Sebastian Sung from he is a professor of the Brain and Cognitive Science Department at and he would try to be able to make this brain, the neurology into a game. And people said that they should not be doing any more games, and that's why we presented him with a seat at the MIT Media Ramp, and we had the game creators there as well. So in his normal base, he is a neuroscientist, so he does that as well. So he talked about using the tools, and the permission is important there as well. So he talked about that from his own experience. And next was Keio. He's an Italian. Neri talked about the Silk Pavilion, and Keio was in the material science. What is possible by using silk was the topic of his presentation. And a hologram can be made from silk, and medicine can be trapped so that it can withstand heat. So that is one of the way of using vaccines in order to give life, or the biodegradable, sustainable cups would be created as well. And the characteristic presented by him is that everything is going to be appearing on the face of the magazines, on the cover of the magazines, and in the middle was that how would the silk be boiled and melted, and it can be formed into anything else. In his team, there will be an artist, or there will be a doctor that handles the vaccines, and an architect and a sustainability engineers. So that is where, starting from his presentation started from a theory and how that can be translated into a real-world application. And I believe there is a common theme, a common thread for everyone. They're all passion. They all hold passion. They're passionate. Like the previous session, there are some people that received the permission, but even without the permission, they would be doing it on their own. And that's the same trait seen in the entrepreneurs. That's true for science and art. You can have it, and you should have these passion. And one of the observations that I'd like to mention now, technical engineers tend to talk about future. That's what Nanjo-san also said. And the art, architect, and urban development talks about history often. They're both needed though. Science and technology and the engineers tends to think about what is going to be possible that were not possible in the past. They would try to make a breakthrough. So to as much degree as possible, doing something that was observed or that was impossible is what they do. And that there's a reality in both ends on the urban development side as well. So merging these two ideas, I believe, is going to be worthwhile. So that talk was a stigma to my creativity in a sense. And actually, because I am a chairman, I would like to be able to ask a question to all three of the gentlemen. Mr. Ichikawa, you talked about the importance of the city and you talked about the intangible urban value. And there's an empathy towards that. In order to heighten that in a city, especially in Tokyo, in order to heighten that sense, what should we do? What should the company do? What should we do as an individual? What would the government need to do? Anything. The importance of the city and the intangible urban value. With all of these in mind, what action should we take? In a nutshell.
The one point.
In a nutshell, 20th century and the 21st century, what's the difference? In the 20th century, we were pursuing quantity. In the 21st century, we are pursuing quality. And in urban areas, it has to be compact. Energy has to be used in an efficient manner. And people's values behind that should be satisfied. I think that would be the answer in a nutshell. If that's the case, what gets in the way of doing that today? Obstacles? In a nutshell, people's values. I mean, I think it's a question of to what extent can people's values change? When values don't change, because the business as usual worked so far, it's very difficult to change the values. When people change their values, we need to change the institution. And whether you can do that or not, I think will make a lot of difference. Right, we shouldn't be bound by success of the past. We have to be innovative. And Schumpeter says that capitalism will fail because of its success. So we have to be humble to the changes. Mr. Nanjo, looking at Asia, new museums in Asia, we see many of them emerging. And you also talked about new creative activities taking place today, but at the same time, these new museums in Asia are showing new movement. As an expert in art, what do you think we should do? What should we do in the face or at the face of that?
これ実はMoMA のグレン・ラウリーも
Glenn Lowry of MoMA and I'm sure Nick Soros of Tate are doing this together with museums in Asia. Conceptualize new museum and have the input from traditional museum. And at the same time, we have to ask ourselves, what is the museums that are being pursued in this framework, which would be different from the museums that exist in Europe or North America, but that has to be based on various expertise. That input is needed. I think that's where we are today. So Japan, the Mori Art Museum, if possible, we'd like to try that as well. So the cooperation that you talked about, do you think that is already emerging, or do you think it will be we will be hard-pressed to pursue that? Well, we see few examples. We need more information. We need more people with more fluidity. Free interchange, exchange is needed. Something close to the internet. The real world has to catch up with what's happening on the internet, I think. Optimism, pessimism, I don't know. Mr. Ito, art and technology, the contact between the two. You gave us a very creative view on that. As an amateur of technology, I'd like to ask this question. The technology of the 20th century, I think, were more or less originating from the military technology, be it robots or internet, whereas the technology in the 21st century, that's very different. Could be environment, could be something else. That's what many of the forward-looking people have been saying, which does make sense to a certain extent. So technology overall, as it progresses, are you seeing change in technology, or do you think there are many challenges? I think one way to look at it is this. Conventional technologies, they were all standalone when there was no internet. Empowered individuals, be it regular citizens or personnel of the military, whereas we are now living in the world based on network. And since everything is connected, when you touch one thing, everything else changes, which is like environment or urban environment. So system thinking would be needed. In the past, you didn't have to have the system thinking. Today, you have to have a system thinking. Otherwise, it will be irrelevant, be it internet or whatever. Unless everyone else uses, it's irrelevant. So how do you connect to the rest of the world would be important. Environment, society that you mentioned, they are all system. So system technology, how you approach the system technology will be critical, which is closer to the discipline of biology. So IT, manufacturing technology that we have seen in the past, from there we are shifting more towards biotechnology. But eventually that leads to survival or war. Environment is about survival. What's happening on the network? That's really a financial battle being played out, which is really along the theory of evolution. The weak being beaten by the stronger, and energy is taken. And I think that is the trend that we see today. That's very insightful from 3 individuals. Why I asked what is the problem, what doesn't need to be addressed? Well, because the people gathered here in this hall are from the creative industry, more or less. Over the last 3 days, I attended the sessions as well as the cabinet office meetings. The healthcare reform is one of the things that was discussed. I see Dr. Kurokawa sitting there. Cities should be offering the leading edge technology and environment. What's happening in Japan is leading edge healthcare is not being enjoyed by the people, even in big cities, because of, if I can use very extreme case, because we are bound by the health insurance system. Anything that can be covered by the medical insurance, health insurance, we can enjoy that. But once we try something beyond that, any other insurance becomes non-applicable, which means that we shouldn't challenge the state-of-the-art, leading-edge medical technology, medical services, which means that cities should actually be offering the leading-edge lifestyle, but Tokyo has a system which makes it impossible for us to enjoy the leading-edge healthcare. So Tokyo is still not number 1. Maybe we need to change the systems that bind us. Otherwise, we might not be able to do better. Tax system is another aspect. If we want a true creative artists to come here, since artists do think about the tax system, when the corporate tax in Tokyo is twice as high as it is in Hong Kong or Singapore, I think people will be reluctant to move here. So there is that reality, which is bound by the past system, and the reality that is forward-looking. And I think we are wavering between the two. So, Mr. Nanjo, what do we have to change? Well, it's not the hardware issue. I think it's about people. To what extent can people understand the new thing, and how aspirational can we be? So it is about education. We are talking about creativity here, but we have to make sure that people understand creativity. Who makes the rules? Of course, the bureaucrats. Bureaucrats need to be creative. They have to have the capability to adapt to new systems. We need a society that has that capability. Professor Ichikawa? Who is making a system? Who is creating a system was one of the questions asked. I don't think so. The systems are a given, and we are trained to comply. But time has changed. I think we have moved into a phase where the systems need to be created, and I don't think we have that mindset yet. Yes, the problem is that the majority of the people still think that way. We have to see more people who believe that we have to change the system. You have been advocating the idea of intangible urban values, which is nothing but culture, part of culture. If I can say just one thing, within art, technology is included, according to some. I disagree, actually. Several years ago, the future scenario of Tokyo was put together, and technology, information, and environment are the people in which people are really talking about the future. These are the groups of people who are doing the simulation very seriously.
So I think much has been changed due to technology. Technology's responsibility is huge. Let's talk about that later. Mr. Ito, would you like to make a comment? Just one thing. Professor Pascal at Harvard University introduced the word positive deviance. What it means is that deviance is a positive change. So rather than trying to change from the center of the bell-shaped curve, you try to look at the people in the edge or trail and try to amplify what they do. As Mr. Ichikawa just said, rather than trying to fix inside, maybe you make small changes outside and re-import inside. A lot of things on the edge can be done without any permission. Mama, and also on the other side, there are a lot of artists working in Soho. So there are two sides of activities, and both of them are very important. Mr. Takenaka is making great effort in cabinet, and we're also working in Boston. We can collaborate, both sides. So the conclusion is the change can happen with efforts of multi-stakeholders. There are multiple ways to go about this, but basis has to be the system of society that people make. And as I listen to your discussion, we often use the word literacy. Economic literacy, internet literacy, literacies are important. But once again, I'm reminded of the importance of literacy to the city. We have to make more efforts to raise that literacy level. When we talk about Tokyo, it is important to have the head of tax office, for example, or maybe top of consumers organization, representing different areas to discuss the issue of a city, what part of infrastructure can be changed, So multi-stakeholders participation is important to discuss a city as a global agenda. And I'm very happy to be able to conclude as I had planned. So let's try to improve literacy, the city literacy. And that will be the key word. I'd like to show you some slides. We had internal discussion. This is the slide that I put up earlier. The forum is trying to consider the challenges of cities amongst multi-stakeholders so that we can share the understanding of the problems. And now I think that it is critical for us to continue the discussion. By doing so, we will be able to raise the level of city literacy. Now, this Innovation City Forum, how we are going to continue on with the discussion, this has to be decided going forward, but we have to be committed positively to try to improve the lifestyles. And this is what we want to propose to all of you. Would you all agree? Thank you very much. Truly, we had a lot of players from different disciplines, covered diverse topics, improving city literacy, and continuing on with the discussion. I'm very happy to share that common understanding. I don't have much time left. I'd like to go around the table once again to ask each speaker to give us a very short closing statement. I listened to a lot of other people, very happy that many of them share the same sensitivity and the value system. I am committed to make a great change. Thank you very much. Continuing with this discussion is important. We haven't had enough of this. Having people representing different fields, listening to each other, there will be always a clue to solution of the problems, and we will be able to make a jump, starting something new for the better future. And that possibility has been generated through discussion. Professor Takenaka, in the beginning, showed us the result of survey based upon the technology of Davos, and it was much more interesting than I had imagined. And innovation, creativity, permission, these are some of the keywords. If we are to continue, we have to apply innovation and risk-taking approaches to the format of the forum itself so that we can create something new. Thank you very much. It has been 10 years since Academyhills came into being as the landmark of Tokyo and symbol of the city. It has played a central role. To commemorate the 10th anniversary, we wanted to have this forum to raise the literacy of the city. I'd like to thank all the participants. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank moderators of the session. We were able to listen to a session with a great pleasure. I'd like to ask the audience to give a big hand to all of the speakers. Thank you very much.